Hi, my name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice, and this is my month in gaming for November 2020. So basically just a short video in which I kind of go over some of the highlights of my gaming activities over the past month. So this past month, I played a couple of new games. I did a few more videos, and I actually, in this month in particular, got rid of a lot of games. It's kind of been a personal project of mine to sort of slim down my collection. I'd like to have fewer games that I play more often. And so this month I took about a couple of weeks to really concentrate on getting rid of some of the games that I already decided I wanted to let go. So I got rid of over 20 games this month. And so part of what I'm going to do in this particular video, a little bit of a departure from what I normally do in these videos, is I'm going to give you, it's kind of like some quick flash reviews of some of the games I got rid of. I hadn't reviewed them up to this point. Now that I've gotten rid of them, I'm not going to review them in the future. So these are just going to be like some quick thoughts on some of the games that I got rid of. So real quick, before we get into that, I did play one game that was new to me. It's called Dungeons & Dragons Adventure Begins. It's a children's game. It's meant to be a game that could introduce kids to the world of D&D. And I did a full review of it. I'll put a link in the description of this video to that video if you'd like to go see the full review. But the quick on that is it's not a very good game in my opinion. If I was a kid and I was interested in seeing what D&D is all about, I think I would be disappointed with this game. And even as an adult, if I was trying to introduce kids to the world of D&D or just to tabletop role-playing games in general, this would not be the game I would use for that. It had some good ideas, but overall it kind of fell flat and was pretty lackluster. So, but again, you can go see my full review if you have any questions in your mind about what exactly is good or bad about it. There will be a link to that in the description here. I did play one other new game. I don't normally talk about digital games on here, but I played a game called Dungeon of the Endless. It's a PC game. And it's basically kind of a cross between a dungeon crawler and a tower defense game. And it was very interesting. The first couple of times I played it, I found it really frustrating. Then I played it multiplayer with my brother. He kind of helped me with the strategies of it. And then I played it a few more times after that and found it a lot more interesting and satisfying. And it is a fairly deep strategic game. So if you like strategy board games, if you like dungeon crawlers or tower defense style games, you might enjoy Dungeons of the Endless. Or Dungeon of the Endless. Singular. Okay. Videos that I did. I did a watch me play of a game called Escape the Dark Sector. Kind of a very atmospheric space survival horror type of game. You're a group of astronauts who are stuck on this space station and you're trying to make your way across the space station to your ship so you can make your escape. And you're encountering different challenges along the way. I say survival horror, it's not real high, like heavy on the horror element. It's got kind of this dark, gritty overtone to it, but there's nothing really graphic or really super scary about it. And then I did a full review of it, which again, there'll be a link in the description to that video if you want to go see my full review. But again, just kind of the quick on it. Not a very satisfying game to me. Very random, very few meaningful choices for the players to make. You're basically just rolling dice and hoping that you get good results. So that was my impression of that. I did the review of D&D Adventure Begins. I did a review of a game called Specter, which is a really good game. There's actually two different games in the line. Either one of them can be played on its own, but you can also combine them. And I did a review of kind of both of the games, really sort of a review of the system of the games. And definitely a really good game. One thing that's especially noteworthy about Specter Ops is it's a very good game to play online with other people via like Zoom or some other video conferencing like that. So check out the full review if you want the details on that. And then I also did a review of two role-playing game products. One is called The Dungeon, and one is called Towns and Taverns, and these are both sets of books of battle mats. So a lot of games like D&D 5th Edition and other tabletop RPGs will have these like tactical combat encounters, and sometimes you need like a battle mat, a gridded map that you can put miniatures on or tokens or whatever and move them around and track things in battle. And these are two products that are really nice to use for that kind of thing. They work really well together. They complement each other really well, and they work really well on their own too. So if you want more information about those, again, reviews, links to reviews are in the description. So now let's talk about the games I got rid of, and just kind of some quick flash reviews of those. I got rid of a game called Inish, which is a really cool game. It is a strategy game, I think for 3 to 5 players, something like that. It's based kind of quasi-historical, like folklore, legendary type of setting, based in like the Celtic Isles. And you have a tribe, and you're playing against everyone else's tribe, and you're trying to basically achieve victory by accomplishing one of any several different objectives. So that's kind of interesting because you can try to control different areas of the map. You can fight each other for control of different areas of the map, but it's not straight, it's not like a straight risk style control the whole map kind of game. You and an opponent can both occupy the same territory without fighting over it if you want. And there's different objectives that you're trying to achieve in order to win the game. So it's a very interesting game. The only reason I let it go is because I have quite a few games where they're essentially like that. Like you have your guys on the map, you're trying to control areas of the map, or you're moving around trying to accomplish different objectives on the map. I have quite a few games that kind of scratch that itch for me, and so Inish was just one that I decided to let go. I got rid of Pandemic Iberia and Pandemic Fall of Rome. I did full reviews for those videos. I'll put links to those in the description of this if you want to check them out. Bottom line is, they're both really good games. They're both good versions of Pandemic, but I just don't need every version of Pandemic in my collection. So those are two that I decided to let go. I talked about Escape the Dark Sector and why I let that go. Rhino Hero is another game I let go. It's a family game / kids game. You're basically building a tower out of cards, kind of Jenga style, in the sense that like you're trying to build as tall a tower as you can. You don't want it to fall over. But it was a pretty fun game. I liked it a lot. The only reason I let it go is because I got it to play with some kids, namely either my niece and nephew or like my cousin's kids, and they're all just kind of outgrown it now. So I gave it away to a family that had younger kids. Let's see. Gear World is a game that I bought. I think it's called Gear World: The Borderlands. It's from Fantasy Flight Games. I got it really cheap, like $10, a few years ago. I never actually played it, and about a few months ago I opened it up. I looked through everything, and I was like, man, this looks really dry and boring. And then I went online and I found a review, and the reviewer was like, yeah, it's really dry and boring. And I was like, why did I buy this, even though it was only $10? Should have done some more research before I got to it. So I just let it go. I never even played it. Another game that's kind of in the same category, not exactly, is Winter Tales. Winter Tales is another game that I got really cheap. It was like $10-20, something like that. It looked interesting. It's basically you are a character from kind of some sort of fairy tale. Some of the characters are like from the Grimm's fairy tales. Some of them are like from Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland. But you're basically one of these fictional characters. You move around this board and you try to accomplish different objectives. And for every action you take, you have to narrate what's happening. So it's kind of a storytelling game in a way. It looks interesting, but again, this is a game that I should have researched a little bit more before I bought it, because a little bit of more research would have revealed to me that it has these like whimsical fairy tale type creatures and characters, but the overall tone of it is kind of like dark and a little gruesome. The artwork is kind of like there's the big bad wolf from Little Red Riding Hood, and he's got like this huge scar across his abdomen. It's all stitched up like he got cut open to let Red Riding Hood out, and then they stitched him back up. And just things like that. It was like kind of like, it's a little bit more like dark and gruesome than I anticipated. And so I decided that ultimately it wasn't a good match for the people I had imagined playing this game with. So I let it go. Planetoid is a really cool game. It was a Kickstarter game that I backed. I played it a couple of times. It's kind of like a memory match game because you have this board with these different tiles that have different resources, and the tiles are face down, and you're kind of like using actions to peek at tiles or flip tiles over, see what they are, and then you're trying to grab these different resources to fulfill orders to get points. So it's kind of a memory match game, but it's a little more strategic than that. You have your like spaceship that you're using to do these different actions, and you can upgrade your spaceship, unlocking new actions that you can do. It was a pretty neat game, but I just not one I saw myself coming back to over and over again. Volt is a pretty cool game where you have, I think, 2 to 4 players, and each player controls a robot, and you're like having these robots battle each other in this arena. You pre-program your actions, like three actions at a time, and so you're trying to anticipate what your opponent might do, and then respond accordingly, plan your actions accordingly, and then after you've programmed your actions, the actions play out and you see what happens. It was a pretty cool game, but again, it was just something that I didn't see myself coming back to repeatedly. If I want a good kind of 1 versus 1 or even like 2 versus 2 kind of like arena battle style thing, I think I'd go to Unmatched, which is a really cool game with a series of expansions that is kind of like this miniatures, like really small scale skirmish arena type of game. So that's it. Volt is a good game, but it's just I have other games that sort of fill that niche. Treasure Hunter is a pretty cool game I got rid of. It's basically a drafting game, but I have other drafting games, but it was fun. I got rid of a game called Spy Club, which I actually did a full review of. Spy Club is a pretty cool game. I'll put the link to the review in the description here if you want to go learn more about it. But basically, it's like kids investigating neighborhood mysteries. Pretty cool theme. The gameplay is actually pretty fun. My only problem with it is that the theme and the gameplay don't really connect very well. There's kind of a disconnect there where it doesn't really match. But it is kind of a neat game. It's a game that you can play as a campaign, and the campaign is fairly randomized, so you could play through multiple campaigns and they'd all be different. I played the game a couple of times just on like once off, and then I played through a campaign, and I enjoyed every time I played it, but I just felt like I'm not going to come back and play through another campaign. It just didn't hold my interest, long enough for me to want to come back and do that again. But it was a good game. I got rid of a game called Tides of Time, which is a 2-player drafting game. Very clever game. It's like less than 20 cards and a few tokens, so it's a very small game. But it has a lot of depth as you learn it and learn what all the different cards are and how they can interact with each other. So that's a pretty cool game. I just let it go because I didn't have... my sister has the game. I played it with her copy of it once recently, so that was kind of fun. But I just didn't see... I'd play it with her again if she wanted to play her copy, but I didn't see the need to hang on to a copy for myself. Friday is a game I got rid of, and Friday is a really cool game. It is a solo only game, and you're basically Robinson Crusoe, stranded on the island, trying to get off. You have to go through a series of challenges and sort of build yourself up so that you can face like the pirates at the end of the game and be able to defeat the pirates. And of course, Friday is there through the whole thing helping you out. It is a really neat game. It's essentially a deck building game for one player, and it was a lot of fun. I played it a whole lot. I just have gotten to the point now where I'm like, I don't see myself playing it a whole lot more. And there's also a really good app implementation of the game that I have. So if I have the itch to go back and play it again, I'll just play the app. I got rid of a game called The Grizzled. The Grizzled is a really cool cooperative game where you are a group of French soldiers in, I think it's World War One, maybe it's World War Two, but I'm pretty sure it's World War One. In any case, you are fighting in the war, and the goal is it's not really a war game so much as it's just about you trying to kind of brave the dangers and the threats and the grief that comes from participating in a war and trying to get back home alive and sane. And it's a very interesting game. It conveys the theme really well. I liked it a lot. I found it surprisingly easy. I had heard that it was a fairly challenging cooperative game, and I had personally found it kind of easy. So that's the main reason I'm letting it go, because as much as I enjoyed the theme and I enjoyed the gameplay, I just didn't feel like it was challenging me much. So I decided to let it go and move on to something more challenging. Thief's Market is a really cool game where you are basically a group of thieves. You get some dice that represent your loot. So you roll the dice and see what loot you got from your heist. And then you try to split that loot up between you. And there's some rules that, determine how you can split it up. But the idea is to try and split it up in a way that you end up with what you want out of the loot, so you can score the most points by the end of the game. It's kind of a neat game. I liked it. But it just seemed like it didn't have a lot of legs. Like, I played it a few times and kind of lost interest after that. Star Wars Empire vs. Rebellion is a 2-player card game. One player is the Empire, the other player is the Rebellion, and it's basically just about some clever card play, trying to outwit your opponent with how you play your cards. It's a neat game. The only thing drawback to it that I can see is that both players' decks are essentially the same, and I feel like there was the opportunity there to make the decks a little bit different, so that one player would feel a little bit more like they are playing the Rebellion because their cards work a little bit different, and the other player could feel more like they are playing the Empire because their cards work a little bit different. And they didn't do that. Instead, both decks were essentially the same, just with different artwork. So a little bit of a missed opportunity there, but a pretty cool little card game for 2 players. I got rid of a game called Double Feature. Now, I don't like party games in general, but I think Double Feature is a pretty cool party game, in that it's essentially a game where you get some cards that might give you, for example, like the name of a popular actor and a genre movie, like comedy, and then you have to try and be the first person to be able to name a movie that is both a comedy and stars that actor, right? So it's a game that tests your knowledge of movies, but it's not like a trivia game where it's like, do you know this obscure fact about this actor or this obscure fact about this movie? It's basically testing you on what you know about the movies you've seen. So I like that concept, and it was a pretty cool game, but the bottom line is that I really don't like party games. So even though it was in my mind, it was an especially good party game, at least especially well suited to my tastes, I just didn't see myself getting to play it very often. I let go a game called Entropy, which is a very clever card game. Beautiful artwork, beautiful production. I backed it on Kickstarter. I don't know that it was ever widely available in retail, but it was a pretty cool game. And it basically was, you were a person from some kind of alternate reality, and all these different alternate realities had like sort of mashed together in some sort of nexus. And you were trying to reconstruct your reality so that you could return to it. And you're reconstructing your reality by collecting different cards that represented shards of your reality. And the cards are dealt out randomly, so some of the shards of your reality might be in other people's hands, some of them might be in the center deck. And so you're basically trying to use different actions to determine where the shards of your reality are. Are they in this person's hand? Is there one still in the deck? Is there one in the discard pile? Whatever. And then you're trying to get those, into your hand so that you can piece together your reality. And you're trying to do that before anyone else can. It's a pretty clever game, gameplay wise, but really the shining point of it was just it had beautiful creative artwork. Production value was really high. So that was it. It was really good, nice to look at. It was fun to play, but it wasn't a game I could see myself playing over and over again. So that's why I decided to let it go. I also let go of some role-playing games. And again, I don't talk a lot on here about role-playing games, but I play role-playing games maybe almost as much as I play board games. And I let go some. I let go of Savage Worlds Deluxe Explorers Edition, slightly older edition of the Savage Worlds role-playing game, which is kind of a generic setting neutral system that lets you play kind of like these fast, pulpy style games. It's a decent system, but I have a lot of other generic RPGs systems that suit my tastes a little bit better, so that's why I let that one go. I got rid of a game called Fairy's Tale, which is a RPG where you're all playing fairies. It is a pretty neat game, especially for kids. But again, the kids that I would play it with have kind of outgrown it, so therefore I let it go. True 20 is a really neat, like D20 based fantasy, not fantasy, it's like just a generic RPG system that you could play any number of genres with. I like it. It was a cool game with maybe about 5 or 6 books. It felt like a really full, complete system. However, the same company did a game called Fantasy Age and then another game called Modern Age. And those two games are basically built on the same system, this Age system. And basically, I feel like their Age system is an evolution of their True 20 system. And I enjoy different aspects of the Age system better than what they did with True 20. So while True 20 is still good, I like it well enough. I think for myself, the Age system has replaced that. And then I got rid of a game called Fireborn, which is sort of an older RPG from Fantasy Flight Games. Has a really cool concept that you're playing humans who are like they're like reincarnated dragons. So you're a human with the soul of a dragon that lived like 1 billion years ago. And so it's kind of cool. It's like this modern urban fantasy type of setting. You're a person, but you develop these like draconic powers, and you play both in the modern fantasy setting, but you also have flashbacks to when you were actually a dragon in sort of this mythic age, and you go back and forth between the two time periods. Really cool concept. The system to me was kind of clunky, and some of the details of the setting I felt were like kind of overwrought and just not really to my taste. So I never actually got it to the table and got to play it, but I still really love that basic concept of your people who have the souls of ancient dragons. That's really cool. So maybe one day I will adapt that general concept and use maybe one of my like generic RPG systems to run it, something like Fate or maybe the Cypher system. But anyway, decided to let that go because there's just the system and some of the specifics of the setting just weren't really to my taste. So those are most of the games that I got rid of. There are a few others I didn't feel like were worth mentioning. And again, the videos that I did, one new game that I played, or a couple new games that I played, links in the description of this video to any other videos that I mentioned that you might want to check out. And again, my name is Nathan. This is Nice at Dice. Thank you so much for watching, and you enjoy the rest of your day.